Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris. His name's Craig. Hey, buddy.
Hey, man, how you doing?
They're not doing too well. They're not doing too well, are they? Now, it's only 4-6 over the last 10 if you try to put it in perspective. But, man, not doing too good. What are they, a game over 500? I said this was going to happen. I don't know who I blame it on, though, right? So who do you blame it on? You blame it on the players? You think Shelton's not doing what he's supposed to do? You think it was all a figment of our imagination what they were? Or is this just a normal early season funk?
I think it's a mix of all of the above. I mean, even before when the Pirates were like 9-2, we basically said that, they weren't doing everything great. Like the defense was kind of getting pulled out by a couple, well-timed home runs, whatever it may be. We said that, Shelton wasn't making some great decisions as far as things go. But the other side of the coin on that is that if, your bullpen is doing everything you need them to do, your players are doing everything they need them to do, and you look like a genius. And when you put a guy in and he's supposed to, shut stuff down and he doesn't, kind of even like just like an example, a recent example, but it's kind of like goes across the board with everything is you bring in Aroldis Chapman, and Aroldis Chapman the day before gets like 3 strikeouts and does everything he needs to do. And then last night he, pretty much walks the bases loaded, and you are in danger of either, losing the game or at least being tied or something at that point in time. And the hitting approach, it's the biggest thing that's been out there, but the hitting approach was the same hitting approach for when they were 9-2 as it is now. So is it players not executing it? And is it just a bad hitting approach?
The hitting, something's wrong with the hitting. If you look at the run that they made between the Mets and the Red Sox series, 3 runs, 1 run, 1 run, 1 run, 2 runs, 1 run. It's brutal. They weren't able to get any offense together, and that. I think the thing that bothers me the most, like if you're going to get swept, if you're going to lose 6 in a row, sometimes you want to see that the teams that you went up against were just a different class of teams. We're talking the Mets and the Red Sox. These are not good teams. And I think that's what's frustrating.
No, we played the Red Sox without Devers, without Casas. We were playing, I think on Sunday, it was like pretty much half of their AAA roster.
And you lose 6-1.
Yeah,
that's bad.
And here's the thing is, everybody knows it. Maybe that was following me on the X or the Instagram or whatever. There might be some stuff out there. I was down at the park on Friday and Saturday, and those were some depressing games to a degree. But I feel like the one on Sunday was kind of the most depressing one in general, just because, the Red Sox put out their Sunday lineup and the Pirates just couldn't get anything going. Now, of course, they win against the Brew Crew last night, actually first game against a divisional opponent this season. But Jared Jones went out and shoved because Jared Jones has gone out and shoved every single start so far this year. The bullpen was able to pull it together. Bednar shut it down, and we had, a leadoff home run by Kutch in the first, a well-timed opposite field hit by O'Neal Cruz, 3 for 3 after, just going off of a cliff for a couple weeks here now for Cruz. But I mean, it wasn't like that the offense like exploded. I mean, Andy Haynes's offense kind of runs on the premise of, the three true outcomes. It runs on the premise of, a walk's as good as a hit, in like the old Billy Bean type thing, the on base percentage, a strikeout, which it's not great, but maybe you're not hitting into a double play or something, and then home runs. And I think that's where the Pirates, in at least some ways, are falling short here. Is the lack of power, and that's something that other people have brought up as well. I don't think I'm breaking ground here by doing that, but I mean, if you look at players, and their projections and what people thought they were possibly going to have before the season started, people safely, you would say that at least, O'Neill Cruz, Jack Sawinski, Brian Reynolds, Rowdy Tellez have, 20 plus home run potential. And, Brian Hayes maybe 10 to 15, and some of the other guys down there, maybe Connor Joe 10 to 15, and you have Brian Hayes with zero, Jack Sawinski with only a couple, Ono Cruz with only three, Rowdy Tellez, hitting for almost zero power altogether. And the best hitters on your team right now are Connor Joe and Alika Williams, and maybe this is the type of approach that works for them. Connor Joe's always been a very patient hitter. Alika Williams struggled when he came up last year, and in limited time, an extremely small sample size, he is performing well. But maybe this is the type of approach that works for him. But Chris, it's not much different than the approach before Eckstein was fired, Haynes' predecessor. That guy preached quadrants. It's like, what is your quadrant? If the ball is in your quadrant, you swing. If the ball is not in your quadrant, you don't swing. So that also, creates walks. It creates strikeouts, and is hoping for, you hitting the ball where you will create the most power. So, and as I said, I think I had mentioned last week, and I've mentioned a billion times before, is I believe this is a Ben Cherington approach. And Haynes is just the guy that he has implementing it. I believe it can work if you have guys that are able to execute it. Right now, the players are not executing it and struggling severely. I'm seeing Rowdy Tellez last night behind the ball so bad that he's not even taking the ball the opposite way and going with the ball the opposite way. He's just like popping out to like shallow left field and stuff. Rowdy Tellez is a power pull hitter. That's where he lives, and it just doesn't seem like he's doing much of that. Jack hit that grand slam at the end of the Phillies series and thought maybe he was getting something going. Had some good approaches at the plate, but not really doing much. And man, Henry Davis just looks absolutely lost at this point in time. Can't catch up with a high fastball, so that's all he's seeing. And then is getting a bunch of off-speed pitches that go outside, and has been caught looking a decent amount of times, a couple of times last night, with balls that are coming right down the middle, because it's almost like he doesn't know what he's looking for. So, and I go back to, I was talking to one of my coworkers this morning, and he just kind of asked me about baseball, because he's just like, oh, Craig has a Pirates podcast, let's see what he thinks. And I said, everybody has to remember that Henry Davis had like the least amount of plate appearances by a 1-1, a first overall draft pick, since like 1972 or something. So he was sped through the system fairly quickly. Was brought up last year because they thought they needed some offense. Put him in right field. He struggled both offensively and defensively. Worked this whole offseason to become a better catcher. I feel like he has he's not, I don't think, ever going to be, like we've talked about, that stalwart, or somebody who's defense first or something. And he has had his mishaps and different stuff, but he's looked a lot better than I was kind of even expecting from him. But I've always said, man, if the bat does not play, then Henry Davis doesn't play, man.
Well, here's the funny thing, and it's a conundrum for the Pirates. How long do you wait until you take a guy like Joey Bart, who's also a high-end draft pick, who's had a few more years to figure things out and has actually been a little productive in very limited time, and give him more games? Because let's be honest, He's only, I think, been in 5 games. I think he's got like 20 at bats or something like that. But I mean, he's produced. He's got 2 home runs. You're looking for power. He's done it for a while. You know, sometimes guys figure it out later on. He's got the pedigree. He's not the guy you drafted. Henry Davis is the guy you drafted. And I'm not saying give up on Henry Davis, but do you want to compete or do you want to develop? Because that's a big question for teams at this point in a rebuild. As you come out of it and you have young talent, are you developing still or are you trying to win ball games? And that's a philosophy that you cannot do both. You have to decide, are we going to leave a guy in just a little bit longer because we're still trying to find out what he's going to be because long-term we want him to be a better pitcher? Are we going to bat a guy in the order who's struggling and stick with him longer because he's part of our long-term plans? And is that how we look at things? Or do we feel like at this point there's enough talent on the team and there's enough talent coming up that if you can't hack it, you're out and we want to win? Because if Davis is going to struggle, then you have this guy that you picked up. Sure, the Giants were done, but in his few games here, he's got a couple of home runs. He's hitting about 300. He's, putting the ball in the play. Why not? So, I mean, like that's the thing. They're going to have to make decisions on things like that. Like, how long do you stick with a guy who's struggling? Henry Davis, if they all of a sudden say, we're going to give this kid a break for a week or two, I don't think that's giving up on him. But I don't know if sending him out there every single day to struggle is the right move. And that's where they have to kind of figure out, like, with each, maybe it's individual with players. Maybe there's a couple guys you're like, you know what? We still have long-term plans for this guy, so we'll stick with him more than we need to. Or we'll see if he can work his thing out. All right? But that is going to be the tug, the push, the pull all season long with this team. Are you trying to make the postseason? Or are you still in development? And I know Pirates fans aren't going to be happy if the answer is we're still in development and we're not concerned if we finish at around 500 this year, because I don't think anybody wants that.
Yeah, and the other part is, I mean, your favorite player, the Tasmanian Devil, Yasmani Grandal, has started his rehab down in AAA.
Yeah, he ain't going to help you.
I'm just not saying he's going to help, but I'm just thinking that, I mean, at some point in time, there's going to be a decision made with 3 catchers, one who has options and 2 that don't, is kind of what it comes down to.
And that's the thing. Think about it this way. Davis can be sent back down without a problem and he's struggling. Like, if it were up to me, I'd say, okay, I mean, this might be what they're doing. Give him as many at-bats as possible before Grandal gets here, because once Grandal gets here, we're going to let Bart and Grandal sit up here because this kid's still struggling. So, and then he's going to go down to AAA and he's going to spend some time down there and try to figure out what's not working here because he isn't ready yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong if he's not ready yet. There really isn't. Trust me, he'll be back up when Grandal's back starts hurting in a month. Okay? Grandal's not, like, if you need to give him a break and send him back down, send him down. Let him work on whatever he needs to work on. Let him get some confidence. Let him hit a few over the wall in AAA and then come back and feel better about himself, rather than feel like he's contributing to major league losses while he struggles. Get him out of it if you need to. Because trust me, Yasmani Grandal is going to get hurt, and you're going to have to bring him back up again. So that might be the reasoning behind everything that they're doing right now. Continue to give this kid whatever you can give him, because when Grandal comes back, Davis goes down. Because right now, if I had to pick who I would send down, I'd send down Davis.
I can't disagree with you, Chris. I mean, it's not something I really want to say. I definitely want to see the kid succeed, but I mean, he obviously also...
He's still going to succeed. I mean, he could still turn into something. You could go down and then come back up again. Your career's not over.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake that Major League Baseball teams make, biggest mistake that they make is that they'll bring a guy up too early. He's got a pedigree. He's a first-round draft choice. And things aren't working out, and they're afraid to send him back down again. I don't think you do a guy any favors by making him go out there night after night in front of very large crowds on television, where the team itself, especially when the team is struggling, right? Like, that's not the environment. He's not going to be the guy that pulls the team out. He is probably, like, think about it. If you are a first-round draft choice or a high-end pick, heck, if you've made it to the major leagues, you likely were the leader of your high school baseball team. You likely were the star who used to pull your team out of garbage. I think pretty much every guy at the major league level at some point in his life has been the guy that everybody else got on his back at a lower level, and he carried him out of it. So his instinct is going to be, I'm going to fix this. I just got to get myself going, and I can be the guy. Because they wouldn't be in major leagues if they never had that attitude at some point in their lives. So when you have a young guy who it's not working very well for him, and people are questioning whether or not he's got it, and there's all this pressure on top of him, he's not sitting there listening to you when you sit there and say, oh, well, you just got to just concentrate on yourself there, Henry. Just, it'll work out. Just worry about your own at-bats. Don't worry about the rest of the team. He's not doing that. His instinct, his mentality as a competitor, what he's had that got him to the majors, is that he wants to do better, and he wants to have those moments where he lifts this team to wins. He wants to do at this level what he did at other levels that got him here. That's what he wants to do. All right? So there's nothing wrong with taking a guy like that when everybody's struggling and saying, all right, young man, go down there where there's no pressure and work on the specific things that you're not working on. Everybody's doing it in Major League Baseball. I point to the guy out in Oakland, Estuary Ruiz. I always say his name wrong. I stumble over it. Estuary Ruiz. I think that's how you say it. Anyway, he's been sent down already. He's a young, good hitter who was sent down already after he had hit 2 home runs for the A's in the first week because he wasn't doing something at the plate that they had talked to him about that they wanted him to do discipline-wise. He's back up now. He's being used as a straight platoon. He's a straight platoon. Everybody's itching to get this guy in. And the A's, one of the worst baseball organizations that there is, with a terrible owner, and they're just a complete mishmash of garbage, okay, have had no problem with the idea of we've got to give him an opportunity to ease his way in because his instinct is to put the team on his back because that's how he got there. So there's nothing wrong with telling Henry Davis, you know what, go down and work things out. You'll be back because I think he'll be back. He's not a bad player because you have to send him down when Grandal gets here.
No, it's not something that you have to. I'm working this through in my head, and I don't want to say send him to AAA, but it kind of seems like the writing is on the wall for that. And like you said, it doesn't show failure because he wouldn't be the first player. I mean, not everybody comes up and hits the ground running and, is able to work through their stuff or is able to succeed right away and has to go back down. And you have to hope that your development is good enough. Your player has, the mental fortitude to succeed by doing that. And I know that Henry probably, he's obviously not going to be happy about it, but I would hope that he would accept the fact that, man, it's just not really working up here. And yeah, I didn't get that many at bats at AAA, and I didn't get that much at AA. And this is kind of, a first full season of anything. And last year I was brought up, when the bats were struggling, and now the bats are struggling. And he hasn't been able to be the one to pull it out. The ones that have to pull it out at this point in time have to be like Brian Reynolds and, Brian Hayes, maybe Jack Sawinski. Especially the first 2 guys as more, veteran bats. But yeah, if we're talking about, we get on Cherington and we get on everybody for, this is a situation to win now. Does it really show winning now when you have your, starting catcher sitting there with an average well below, 200. I think his OPS plus was, it was plummeting. The last time I saw it was around 60. It might even be down to like 57 or something at this point. Because he's not really doing it. It's some guys are like, if they're struggling, they're still at least walking. But it doesn't seem like Henry Davis, can really get anything going. Are you a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates and supporting small businesses? If so, Bucs in the Basement has you covered. Introducing the Bucs in the Basement Vouch Store with products from places like Split Rock Coffee. Coffee with a purpose. Established, owned, and operated by disabled veterans, sworn to protect America. Or
Camp Craft Cocktails. More than cocktails. It's a mission to build longer tables where everyone is welcome. We try and vouch for these products. Bucs in the Basement. Proudly brought to you by VOUCH. Visit our VOUCH store at bucsinthebasement.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
You talk about that platoon thing, and for some reason that just clicks something in my head, and I hate to go down like a rabbit hole or to change subjects completely. I don't know how much more we could talk about Henry Davis. I think we're both on the same page with that. But it's the whole thing with the platoons, like with Connor Joe and with Edward Olivares. Connor Joe is a guy that throughout his career, I mean, I was looking up his career um, platoon splits. Right hand versus right-handed pitchers. Connor Joe's a right-handed hitter. His OPS is 727 for his career. Against left-handed, it's 788 for his career. Last year he did a little bit better. It was like 820 versus 720. But this year he's actually hitting better against right-handed pitchers, and Rowdy Tellez really isn't hitting at all. So it's like,
You're saying there's absolutely no reason to be doing a platoon, and that maybe Rowdy Tellez should step aside, and Connor Joe should be playing every day at first base. And I'm 100% with
yeah,
you. I'm 100% with you. I was going to bring it up earlier, but I was like, well, I think the writing's on the wall. Connor Joe's killing it. He can play first base, and again, Tellez comes off the bench. You can still use him. You don't have to get rid of him. But you're struggling offensively. That's the biggest. Again, when you're struggling offensively, and this now turns the spotlight on Shelton, because I asked you who's responsible for this, and you're like, a little bit of everything. And he was in the group of people I said were possibilities. It's up to the manager to say, okay, the bats aren't working. We need to run a little bit more. We need to create runs. We need to kind of juggle the lineup a little bit. We got to go with the hot hand. Connor Joe's hot. Okay? He's hot. Use him.
yeah. And the other one for me was more of like an Edward Olivares. Edward Olivares. I mean, everybody kind of pointed towards his platoon splits before, and I remember, people can go back and listen to this, I brought up to Jason Mackey the last time that we had him on, and I just basically said, coming up through the minors, Edward Olivares actually hit right-handed pitchers better than left-handed pitchers. And you look at his platoon splits for his a little bit younger of a career, but against right-handed hitters 727, against left-handed 728. And he's actually like one of the guys that's hitting the ball well. If you want to get these things going at some point in time, instead of just letting everybody sit there and just completely struggle. I mean, Jack Sawinski, I mean, for the most part, aside from that grand slam and a home run that he had against a left-hander, which feels like a lifetime ago, even though it was only a couple weeks ago. I mean, hasn't really been doing that much. And I mean, just maybe get him into the thing more. I mean, we're seeing problems in the outfield because the outfield is just getting moved around so much. There's like no consistency in the outfield. You have, Reynolds playing right field one day and playing left field another day, and then you'll have a different guy in center field, and then Michael A. Taylor will be in there. And we've just seen a lot of miscues from outfielders where it's like two guys going for the ball and like nobody's calling for it. I feel like I'm watching my son's little league baseball team at times. I mean, some of that stuff has to do with having, number one, a strong voice in the outfield. And I know that Michael A. Taylor has performed well at periods of time, but there's been times where it's like, well, that should be the center fielder's ball and he should be calling for it, and there's like a lack of communication there. So I mean, I don't know. So I feel like that. I mean, I know that a lot of times, and I think somebody showed it last year, that lineups are, kind of fluid in Major League Baseball at this point in time. And there was only a handful of teams that used, the same or even a similar lineup more than, a handful of times. But it seems like at some point in time, like I like analytics, Chris. You know that I like analytics. I study baseball savant, like, on the regular, and we point out a bunch of that stuff at different times. But sometimes when it's like, okay, the analytics are saying this, but for about the past 2 weeks, the eye test has been showing me this. maybe we need to reevaluate. Maybe, the eye test is working a little bit more now, and it's something that can be revisited. Like I said, you said Telez doesn't have to it's not like he's gone. But a lot of times some guys just get him back in the cage and rework something and rework an approach and bring him in positions against a guy he's been really successful against or something. You know what I mean? Like there's changes that could be made, but it almost seems like, okay, we're going up against a righty, so we got to put Telez in there and we got to have Sawinski, and it's just like sometimes if a player's on a cold streak and just needs to sit for a couple days, let him sit for a couple of days.
Maybe they subscribe, maybe Derek Shelton, maybe Ben Cherington subscribe to the same thing that my dad always used to say about baseball. Wait till Memorial Day, look at all the stats, look at the standings, that's your team. Maybe the idea is, hey, we got to give everybody a couple months here to see what we have before we overreact and take a guy out of a lineup. And if that's the case, fine. I mean, and look, if they got to Memorial Day and they were a team that was hovering around 500, I said it a couple of weeks ago. It aggravated people who just wanted the world. And I said, what I really want for this team is just to be a 500 team, maybe a couple games above it when they get into the summer, because there's arms coming and you know more about your team and you know how to use your team at that point. If you have Telez doing what he's doing now, when you get to the end of May, you can't walk into June doing the same thing. Then you're a fool, right? Like if your idea is, okay, we've got this, what our plan was, we came up with a plan, we don't want to pull the plug on a plan until we're sure, then it might just be stubbornness over the plan. And it may pay off for them. It may work out in the end. But it's something to look at right now as, I don't know if this is working. Okay? And not every signing that you make is good. Not every prospect turns into what you want him to be. Not everybody who seems like they're ready in spring training is actually ready and they need to go back to AAA. That's baseball. Every team in Major League Baseball deals with these problems, unless you're the Dodgers, because you're the Dodgers. Okay? But everybody else is dealing with this. Maybe the Braves aren't dealing with it. The majority of teams are dealing with this. A young team like the Pirates are definitely going to deal with this. It's what you do with it, right? And again, this always goes back. I have a hard time being angry with how the Pirates are doing things in the moment based off of a couple of games, when in reality what we're looking at is a large body of work over several years in the hopes that they could put together a core that they could go out and start having winning season after winning season and play winning baseball going forward, right? And so we're at this weird phase right now where I'm sure there are guys that Ben Cherington will have a hard time saying that guy didn't work out, because he either traded for him, signed him, or developed him, and he planned on him. And there are going to be guys that Derek Shelton's going to have a very hard time saying, that guy did not turn into what I thought he was going to be. And this is a real crossroads for a team that's coming out of a build. Because you're going to eventually have to, you don't want to be impatient. You don't want to take years of work and throw it away because you had 2 weeks. But there's going to be a point this season where some guys, they're going to decide what this person is. Are they ready yet? Is it next man up? Is there somebody else who would you rather go with? Did this guy work out? Did they not work out? I mean, right now I would say that I wouldn't think Rowdy's got, if he's still doing this at the end of May, he should not be in the lineup every day. If they really believe that the baseball card's going to come true and they just got to give him some time, maybe you don't blow up the plan early. It is still April. You know, it's that you're not 10 games under. You're not 5 under right now. You still have a winning record. Don't worry about the standings. Don't worry about where you sit in the standings. Don't worry about if you're in first place, second place, third place, fourth place. Just look at your record right now. You have a team that's hovering around 500, a little bit above it, had a bad little stretch. They could take 3 out of 4 from the Brewers here. And yes, the problems will still exist, but I wouldn't overreact to something yet, right? Like I'm not ready to overreact, but I think that you have to be evaluating. You have to be looking at it saying, how can we get a little bit more out of somebody? Maybe try Joe once or twice. Okay? And go against your idea of the platoon once or twice. See what happens now. You know, I get that. Experiment a little bit. I have no problem using Henry Davis as much as you want to until Yasmani Grandal gets here, because I think the logical move then is to send him down.
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
definitely, Chris. I mean, it's easy to criticize teams when they're doing poorly, and when they're on a 6-game losing streak, everything's going wrong, and every decision they make is a poor one. I The biggest narrative I keep on saying after we record, something happens like every single time. I think last time after we recorded about Brian Hayes, and then he was down for a couple days with a back issue. And then, of course, that night, Jared Jones gets pulled after 59 pitches, and I actually had to turn off X because I thought that my phone was going to explode by just the absolute vigor coming out of it from Pirates fans and hatred towards the decision that was being made. It comes out later that it was a decision that was decided upon that the most he was going to go was 5 innings, and in the way that Derek Shelton and both Jared Jones phrased it, obviously wasn't the best. They basically said no matter what, it was going to be 5 innings. As anybody who's ever played baseball, coached baseball, or whatever before, it's basically saying if you're doing well, it's going to be 5 innings. If you're not doing so well, I'm guaranteeing you they had a pitch count in their head. But people are like, well, the previous like 3 starts, he went like 81, 85, 89. So why can't he go like that every time? Well, it was his first time where he was going on only the 4 days rest on the regular 5-day schedule. And everybody's like, well, he went back up to 91 pitches last night. And I'm like, yeah, because he hasn't pitched since last Tuesday. Like, this is how pitch counts in baseball work. And
People aren't getting the fact that he's young, he's new, he just got here, and this is part of the development part. That's the It's frustrating. I get it. You're aggravated because you want to just go now. You want to hit the gas. You want to go. It was a long last couple of years. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to blow out this kid's arm? Like if they think that he's not ready to go at that pace yet, then you're going to have to deal with those kind of restrictions. Okay? Like, guess what? Here, I'll tell everybody a secret. Some people might not realize it. The Pittsburgh Pirates are not going to win the World Series this year. Okay? I know it's Bucs in the basement, but I'm going to tell you this right now. The Pittsburgh Pirates are not going to win the World Series this year. They're not good enough. The class of Major League Baseball is still a level or two higher than what they are right now. It's just the truth. All right? Are they an improved team? Yes. Can they compete to make it to the playoffs? You bet they can. Should they be competing to make it to the playoffs? Yes, they should. But if they ever want to get to the level where they can actually compete to win a world championship, they can't shoot themselves in the foot, ruin a kid's arm, do things that are going to break up the momentum that they have because they don't have the money to fix a problem if a guy gets hurt like the Dodgers or the Braves. They can't do that.
Like
their owner's never going to do it.
You mean the Braves, like with Spencer Strider, who is almost the same exact pitcher as Jared Jones, a little bit older, but bumped up from 136 innings to 189 regular season innings last year, and is on the shelf now. Is that the same Braves that we're talking about?
Exactly. Well, it's the same way that everybody keeps arguing, like, bring up Paul Skeens. In fact, that's becoming a national thing now. Yeah. They should just elevate Skeens. Nobody's noticing he's going like 3 innings.
And 65 pitches maxing out.
Right. He's not ready yet. Okay? If you had a pitcher that was only going to go 3 innings, maybe 4, max out, and then you had to go to your bullpen, you'd be frustrated at the major leagues with that. Nobody's paying any attention. Like, that's the thing. It sucks. I get it. Like, O'Neal Cruz is struggling at the plate. He also missed basically a whole season last year. It sucks because you're right there. You're on the cusp. You want it to be 2025 and 2026 right now, but it's not. It's 2024. Again, I don't want them trading players away. I didn't want them in the offseason making moves that were just for building. I didn't want that. I wanted them to compete. I think they will compete, but they're not at the echelon yet where they can win a championship. And so you want them to compete. Maybe they get a puncher's chance. Maybe a miracle happens. Baseball's a beautiful game in the playoffs, right? It's a beautiful game, all right? But none of you would put down your hard-earned money on them winning a World Series this year. You want to get to a point where you're like, I should bet the Bucs this year because they got a great chance of making a run all the way to the end. They're not there yet. And they're not going to get there if you don't look at the big picture from time to time, even in a season like this.
Yeah, and you have people stirring the pot, people with actual, media reach and different stuff saying that they should have moved Bailey Falter up a day, put him on like 3 days rest so that Jared Jones could get, or 4 days, 3 days rest would have been so Jared Jones could get more rest and so he could pitch more. And here's the thing: is guess what?
Well, why not go to a 6-man rotation? I mean, if that's the issue, I would make the argument there are teams in baseball that go to 6-man rotations or have a swing guy where that guy's doing long relief and he comes in and pitches that game to push that guy to that
I
extra
think the
day's
Orioles
rest.
did that with Grayson Rodriguez last year, didn't they?
They did exactly. You got it right there. The Orioles did it with Grayson Rodriguez last year. Okay, and people were clamoring. Remember, they were running to the postseason. Orioles fans were pissed because he wasn't going on a regular rest and they kept stretching him out. They wanted him and they wanted him now. And you know what? It would have been a mistake. And he's a stud now this year. He's even better this year because they treated him that way the year before. Okay? You can't lose the big picture here trying to win this year. I want him to win this year, but let's not hurt our pitcher in the process of doing so.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day